In the early hours of August 6, 1945, the airfield at Northfield on the island of Tinian lay under a pale tropical darkness, heavy with heat and the distant sound of engines being tested. The Pacific night was calm, almost indifferent, as ground crews moved with deliberate efficiency around a silver B-29 Super Fortress standing alone at the far end of the runway. Its name, painted in black on the nose, was Enola Gay. Inside the aircraft, the crew spoke little. They had been briefed, trained, isolated from other units, and told only what they needed to know. The mission was classified, the payload unprecedented, the destination a city most of them had never seen. Colonel Paul Tibbets, commanding the aircraft, took his seat in the cockpit just before 2:45 a.m., knowing only that the weapon carried in the bomb bay was unlike anything ever used in war, and that the flight would enter history the moment it left the ground. The Enola Gay lifted off at 2:45 a.m. local time, its engine straining under the weight of the single bomb it carried, a gun-type uranium device weighing nearly 4 tons. The flight path took the aircraft northeast over the Pacific, climbing steadily to an operational altitude above 30,000 feet. 2 other B-29s accompanied the mission, one to carry scientific instruments, another to conduct photographic documentation. Radio silence was maintained. Below them, the ocean reflected faint starlight, empty and vast, while ahead lay the Japanese home islands, still largely untouched by this form of warfare. Hiroshima had not been heavily bombed throughout the war. It was a military city, a port, a communications center, and home to the headquarters of the Japanese Second Army. More importantly, it was relatively intact, making it a suitable target for evaluating the full effect of the new weapon. As dawn approached, the Enola Gay passed over Iwo Jima, where American fighter planes stood ready in case of emergency. The crew checked instruments again and again, aware that there would be no second chance. In the bomb bay, the device known as Little Boy was armed during flight, a procedure that required physical assembly of the firing mechanism while airborne. The responsibility fell to Captain William Parsons, who worked in the narrow bomb bay corridor with deliberate precision. There was no dramatic exchange, no spoken acknowledgement of what was being done. The process was technical, methodical, treated as any other combat procedure. Yet the silence carried a different weight. This was not simply another bombing run over Japan. This was a test not only of a weapon, but of an entirely new form of power. Hiroshima lay below, waking to another ordinary summer morning. The air raid sirens had sounded earlier in the night, triggered by distant American reconnaissance planes, but the all-clear had been given shortly after. Most citizens had returned to their homes or workplaces. School children were assembling for labor assignments, clearing fire lanes in preparation for expected conventional bombing. The sky was clear, the weather ideal for visibility. At 7:09 a.m., Japanese radar detected approaching aircraft, but the number was small. 3 planes were reported. The decision was made not to sound a full-scale alarm. Over the previous months, Japanese cities had grown accustomed to small reconnaissance flights. The civilians of Hiroshima paid little attention as the 3 silver dots moved high across the blue sky. At 8:09 a.m., the Enola Gay began its bombing run. The aircraft leveled at approximately 31,000 feet, directly over the city center. The bomb aimer, Major Thomas Farabee, took control, using the Norden bomb site to align the aircraft over the Aioi Bridge, a T-shaped structure easily recognizable from the air. Inside the plane, the crew felt a strange calm settle in. There was no flak, no fighter opposition, no visible sign of danger. Below them, Hiroshima lay fully exposed, its wooden buildings, streets, rivers, and people entirely unaware of what was about to occur. At 8:15 a.m. and 17 seconds, the bomb was released. Little Boy fell for 43 seconds, tumbling silently through the air before detonating at an altitude of approximately 600 meters above the city. The explosion did not touch the ground. Instead, it ignited in midair, releasing in an instant a burst of energy equivalent to approximately 15 tons of TNT. A sphere of light brighter than the sun expanded outward, accompanied by a heat wave that reached temperatures exceeding several thousand degrees Celsius. Within a fraction of a second, the city below was engulfed in a blinding white flash that erased colors, shadows, and human perception itself. From the perspective of the crew, the explosion appeared as a rapidly rising column of light and dust, followed by a massive shockwave that struck the aircraft seconds later. The Enola Gay shook violently, dropping several hundred feet before stabilizing. Some crew members shouted in disbelief. Others remained silent, staring through protective goggles at a sight no one had ever witnessed before: a towering mushroom cloud rising over Hiroshima, expanding upward and outward, boiling with smoke, fire, and debris. The city itself had vanished beneath a growing mass of ash and vapor. On the ground, the effects were immediate and absolute. At the hypocenter, directly beneath the explosion, the temperature exceeded that of the surface of the sun. Human beings were vaporized where they stood. Stone steps, metal railings, and brick walls were etched with the silhouettes of people who had been standing nearby, their bodies reduced to shadows burned into solid surfaces. Wooden buildings burst into flames instantly. Concrete structures collapsed inward. The blast wave traveled outward at supersonic speed, flattening nearly everything within a radius of several kilometers. Windows shattered as far as 20 kilometers away. Rivers boiled. Trees were uprooted. Streetcars were lifted from their tracks and hurled aside like toys. Those who survived the initial flash experienced a world transformed beyond recognition. The air was filled with dust, smoke, and debris so dense it turned daylight into darkness. Survivors stumbled through ruins, their clothes burned away, skin hanging from their bodies, eyes blinded, ears ringing. Many were unable to speak, others screamed without sound. Fires erupted across the city, merging into a single massive firestorm that consumed what remained of Hiroshima's urban core. The wind generated by the heat pulled oxygen toward the center, feeding the flames and trapping thousands who had initially escaped the blast but now found themselves surrounded by burning wreckage. The Enola Gay turned away from the city, climbing higher as the mushroom cloud continued to rise. Within minutes, it reached a height of over 10 kilometers, visible from more than 100 miles away. Onboard instruments recorded radiation levels, shockwave data, and atmospheric changes. The mission was considered successful. Photographs were taken, observations were logged. The aircraft returned to Tinian after a flight of over 12 hours. The crew was debriefed, congratulated, and awarded medals. Few words were exchanged about what they had seen. The language remained technical, professional, confined to measurements and performance. There was no vocabulary yet for what had occurred below. In Hiroshima, the city no longer functioned as a city. Communication lines were destroyed, hospitals were gone, medical staff were dead or wounded. Tens of thousands wandered through the ruins in silence, searching for family members who no longer existed. The riverbanks filled with burned bodies. Makeshift shelters were erected from scrap wood and cloth. Rain began to fall later that day, dark and oily, carrying radioactive ash that stained the skin and clothing of survivors. Those exposed began to fall ill within hours, vomiting, bleeding, collapsing without visible wounds. The cause was unknown. Doctors, already overwhelmed, could not explain the symptoms. There was no precedent, no treatment, no understanding of radiation sickness. Japanese authorities initially struggled to comprehend what had happened. Communication with Hiroshima was lost. Reconnaissance flights were sent. When they arrived, they found not a damaged city, but a blank space where a city had once existed. Reports described total annihilation. Military leaders could not identify the weapon used. Some believed it was a new type of incendiary bomb. Others suspected something more severe. It was only days later, after further analysis and American announcements, that the full nature of the attack became known. The strike on Hiroshima was not followed by immediate surrender. It existed in a moment of uncertainty, suspended between shock and continuation. The city lay in ruins, but the war was not yet over. For the people of Hiroshima, however, the war had ended in a single instant, replaced by a reality defined by loss, injury, and silence. Streets that once carried bicycles, carts, and schoolchildren were now fields of ash. The clock at Hiroshima's central bank stopped at 8:15, preserved in melted metal. The city's identity had been erased, not by gradual destruction, but by a single burst of light. The execution of the strike unfolded not as a dramatic battlefield confrontation, but as a controlled, distant operation conducted from high above, unseen by its victims, and concluded within minutes. There were no dogfights, no opposing armies, no visible enemy response. The destruction arrived without warning, without defense, without sound, until it was already too late to escape. It was warfare reduced to a single mechanical action: release, detonation, withdrawal. The human consequences unfolded afterward, slowly, painfully, in silence, among the ruins. By the end of the day, Hiroshima was burning. Over 70,000 people were dead or dying. The exact number would never be known. Records had vanished. Entire families were erased. The survivors carried wounds that could not be measured, illnesses that would emerge over months and years, memories that would remain long after the smoke cleared. The aircraft that delivered the weapon returned to its base intact, its mission logged as completed, its fuel tanks empty, its crew alive. The city below remained, in official terms, a target successfully neutralized. In human terms, it no longer existed as it had that morning. Only fragments remained, scattered across a landscape of ash where a living city had stood just hours before. In the days that followed, the silence over Hiroshima was broken only by the sounds of movement among ruins. There were no organized rescue operations at first, no central command, no functioning civil authority capable of directing relief. Those who could still walk became the searchers. They moved slowly through collapsed neighborhoods, calling out names into spaces where streets no longer existed, listening for any reply that might rise from beneath layers of timber, brick, and ash. Many survivors were so badly burned that they could not recognize one another. Faces were swollen beyond familiarity, hair burned away, skin darkened and split. People passed family members without knowing it, separated not by distance, but by injury so severe it erased identity. The rivers that cut through the city became gathering points for the wounded. Thousands had fled toward water instinctively, driven by thirst and burning skin. The banks filled with bodies lying motionless in the shallow current, some alive, some already dead, many beyond help. The water itself offered little relief. It was warm, polluted with debris, and in places clogged with corpses that drifted slowly downstream. Those who drank from it often became sick within hours, though no one yet understood why. The smell of burned flesh, mixed with smoke and stagnant water, hanging over the city like a permanent fog. Medical care existed only in fragments. Of the city's doctors and nurses, a large portion had been killed instantly. Hospitals had been flattened. The few medical facilities still standing were overwhelmed within minutes. Survivors arrived with burns covering most of their bodies, with eyes damaged beyond repair, with wounds that bled without visible cause. There were no supplies. Bandages were made from torn clothing. Medicines had been destroyed. Surgical instruments were lost under rubble. Doctors could do little more than offer water, shade, and words that carried no real promise. Many patients died quietly where they lay, not from visible injuries, but from internal damage that no one could see. By nightfall, the fires that had consumed Hiroshima began to fade, not because they had been extinguished, but because there was little left to burn. The city had become a blackened plain, punctuated by skeletal concrete structures and scattered debris. The glow that had filled the sky earlier was replaced by darkness, broken only by small, isolated flames and the distant lanterns carried by survivors searching for relatives. There was no electricity, no communication, no clear boundary between life and death. People slept on the ground among the ruins, surrounded by the remains of homes, shops, schools, and temples that had defined their lives only hours before. For many, the next phase of suffering began after they believed they had survived. In the days following the explosion, those who had seemed relatively uninjured began to fall ill. Hair fell out in clumps, gums bled, skin darkened, blistered, and peeled. Fevers rose without infection. People vomited repeatedly, unable to keep down food or water. Purple spots appeared beneath the skin, signs of internal bleeding that no one could explain. Some collapsed suddenly and died, even though they had escaped the initial blast with no visible wounds. The phenomenon was unfamiliar to Japanese doctors and soldiers alike. There was no name for it, no understanding of its cause, no treatment to offer. Military units eventually entered the city, attempting to restore order and assess the damage. What they found defied existing categories of destruction. Conventional bombing left patterns, burned districts, collapsed factories, identifiable targets. Hiroshima offered none of this. The destruction was uniform, circular, centered around an invisible point in the air. Entire regiments sent to the city to assist with relief were themselves incapacitated within days, suffering the same symptoms as the civilians they came to help. Reports were sent to Tokyo describing a weapon of extraordinary power, one that killed without shrapnel, without fire, without leaving wounds that made sense. The psychological effect on survivors was as profound as the physical damage. Many wandered the ruins in silence, unable to process what had happened. Some spoke of a sudden white light, followed by darkness. Others remembered nothing at all, only waking among debris with no memory of how they had arrived there. Children searched for parents who no longer existed. Parents searched for children whose names would never be found in any official record. Funerals were impossible. There were too many dead, too few bodies intact enough to identify, too little space left for proper burial. Mass cremations were carried out in open fields, using scavenged wood and broken furniture as fuel. The absence of sound became one of the defining features of the aftermath. Hiroshima had once been a city of movement, trams, markets, schools, factories, military headquarters. After the explosion, there was no traffic, no commerce, no routine. The noise of daily life was replaced by wind moving through ruins and the quiet coughing of the injured. Even grief seemed muted, not because it was absent, but because it exceeded any form of expression. People sat among the remains of their homes without speaking, staring at empty spaces where walls, streets, and entire neighborhoods had once stood. From the American perspective, the strike was recorded as a military operation completed according to plan. The weapon functioned as designed. The target was successfully destroyed. Scientific data was collected. The effects were documented. Reports circulated through military and political channels describing the unprecedented scale of damage. There was little direct knowledge of individual suffering, no personal images of burned bodies or collapsed families. The destruction existed as numbers, diagrams, aerial photographs. The distance between those who ordered the strike and those who lived beneath it remained absolute, separated by thousands of miles and entirely different realities. Within Japan, news of the destruction spread slowly and unevenly. The government initially struggled to control information, both because of censorship and because communication infrastructure had been crippled. Rumors circulated, an entire city destroyed by a single bomb, a new weapon that killed people days after it exploded, a force unlike anything previously encountered. For many Japanese citizens, Hiroshima became a symbol not of defeat, but of incomprehensible power. It was not merely another air raid, not another burned city like Tokyo, Osaka, or Kobe. It was something outside existing experience, something that did not fit within the established language of war. The execution of the strike revealed a new form of combat in which destruction no longer required prolonged engagement, territorial occupation, or sustained campaigns. The decisive moment lasted less than a minute. The consequences unfolded over years. For the people of Hiroshima, the war did not end with surrender announcements or armistice documents. It ended in a flash of light, followed by a lifetime defined by injury, illness, and absence. Survivors carried physical scars that never healed and memories that could not be shared with those who had not been there. Many spoke later of feeling separated from the rest of humanity, as if they had witnessed something that placed them permanently outside ordinary time. The city itself did not recover quickly. Reconstruction took years. Entire districts had to be cleared before building could begin. Radiation levels remained high in some areas, discouraging resettlement. Survivors faced discrimination from employers and potential spouses, feared as carriers of invisible illness. Children born in the years following the attack were monitored for abnormalities, their bodies treated as medical evidence rather than ordinary lives. Hiroshima became not only a place, but a condition, a category of human experience defined by exposure to an event that had no historical precedent. Yet within the ruins, ordinary human behavior slowly returned. Markets reappeared in temporary shelters. Schools reopened in undamaged buildings. Families reconstructed homes from scrap materials. The routines of daily life, however fragile, began to replace the paralysis of shock. People planted gardens in soil still contaminated with ash. They marked anniversaries of the attack, not with celebration, but with quiet gatherings and moments of silence. The city that had been erased began to exist again, not as it was, but as something shaped entirely by what had happened above it at 8:15 a.m. The strike on Hiroshima was executed with precision, efficiency, and distance. It required no invasion, no ground troops, no visible enemy resistance. The weapon was delivered by a single aircraft, released at high altitude, and detonated without warning. The pilots returned to base. The city ceased to function. The difference between those two outcomes defined a new reality of warfare, one in which destruction could be inflicted without confrontation, and suffering could unfold entirely out of sight of those who initiated it. For those who lived through it, Hiroshima was not an event measured in strategic outcomes or historical consequences. It was measured in missing family members, in burned skin, in nights spent among ruins listening for voices that would never answer. The execution of the strike did not feel like a turning point in global conflict. It felt like the sudden collapse of the world itself, followed by the slow, uncertain realization that survival did not mean safety, and that the moment of destruction was only the beginning of a much longer, quieter form of suffering. In the years that followed, the physical landscape of Hiroshima changed, but certain traces remained. The outlines of shadows burned into stone were preserved. Twisted metal structures were left standing as silent markers of what had occurred. The exact point beneath the explosion was identified and marked, not as a battlefield, but as a reference, a place where ordinary time had ended for thousands of people at once. Visitors came not to observe a military victory or defeat, but to stand in a space where an entire city had disappeared in the span of a heartbeat. The execution of the Hiroshima strike thus existed on two levels simultaneously. On one level, it was a mission completed according to military planning, involving aircraft, coordinates, timing, and technical success. On another, it was the sudden erasure of human lives, routines, and futures on a scale that no previous weapon had achieved. These two realities never fully intersected. The men who delivered the bomb experienced the event through instruments and distant observation. The people who received it experienced it through fire, darkness, silence, and the long aftermath of survival in a world that no longer resembled the one they had known just moments before.